A call for even tougher plans to cut greenhouse emissions by the end of next year. And for the first time, there's a demand to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies. The first draft of the Glasgow climate deal has been released as the crucial COP26 summit enters its final stretch. The international community is being urged to dig deeper and do more.
It's crunch time for negotiators at COP26. Over the next 3 days, they will battle over fine details before striking a final deal by the end of the summit on Friday. Host Britain has released a draft pushing countries to revisit current pledges to cut greenhouse emissions and strengthen them by the end of next year. That underscores concerns that there's a huge gap between existing national pledges and the kind of cuts required to keep the world from a climate crisis. Researchers believe the national plan submitted so far would allow the Earth's temperature to rise by 2.4 degrees from pre-industrial levels by the end of the century, far higher than the 1.5-degree cap needed to avert a catastrophe. But big divisions remain. Among them are disagreements over carbon market rules and payments to poorer, climate-vulnerable nations. As diplomats hammer out a deal, the focus on day 10 of negotiations is the transport sector. It accounts for about a quarter of global emissions. Hundreds of city and regional authorities have pledged to eliminate new car emissions by 2040. But the agreement so far lacks the support of some of the world's largest auto players, including Volkswagen and Toyota.
Laura Megan-Isherwood joins us live from London. Laura, how has this draft deal been received so far?
Well, obviously, it's been delivered with a lot of fanfare from the UK COP26 presidency group, who released this morning, a 7-page document outlining what this group of nations plans to do to try to tackle the climate crisis. Of course, there needs to be a lot of talks about what's in it, trying to bring nations together on it and ensure that what is delivered at the end of this summit is at least kind of achievable. But activists, climate activists, have said that it's essentially not going far enough. It's just a tick box exercise, they say, trying to make out that things are being done, with the head of Greenpeace International saying this draft deal is not a plan to solve the climate crisis. It's simply a case of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. Of course, we heard from scientists that the pledges that have been made so far would actually lead to a global warming they think of around 2.4 degrees, well away from that 1.5 degree global temperature rise target that has been in place since the Paris Accord set 6 years ago. And perhaps the drama and the importance of this is building, given that the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is heading back to Glasgow. He's set to deliver a speech to the conference this afternoon, and he said he really wants to keep this 1.5 dream alive, and saying that it is the responsibility of all nations to come together and try to find a way to solve this climate crisis that is affecting the whole world.
Clean transport is in focus today. Now, the UK is hoping to lead the way, but are automakers following and coming on board?
Well, absolutely. This pledge today that around 24 countries have signed to try to phase out the use of petrol and diesel vehicles and transport by 2040 is being touted as a big step forward. And there's a number of car companies that have signed on to that as well, including Ford, Volvo and Mercedes-Benz. But there are, of course, as it was mentioned earlier, a few others that haven't yet signed that deal. Volkswagen, Toyota and BMW, just a few of them, with the latter saying that they're concerned that there simply isn't the infrastructure available to make this possible. Of course, what they're talking about there is the number of electric vehicle charging points that might be in situ around Europe in particular, and also across the US, of course. And also, I suppose, in terms of their factory setup, do they have the infrastructure in place there to ensure that they will be able to produce these cars in the numbers that they're needed by that given deadline? But of course, we know that transport is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions around the world. And consequently, there will be a really big push on this today, trying to draw more nations into that agreement and really put the pressure on to car manufacturers as well to get on board and try to eliminate that volume of greenhouse gases that is emitted into the atmosphere.
Many thanks. Laura Megan-Isherwood in London.